I once walked into my son-in-law's mansion dressed like a cleaning lady. Everyone froze, but not out of respect. They thought I was the help. His mother ordered me to bring her napkin. His father told me to stay in my place. And my daughter? She stayed silent. What they didn't know was that I owned the company that cleans their mansion. That night, I didn't lose my dignity. They lost theirs. If you've ever been judged for how you look, not for who you are, this story is for you. Leave a comment and tell me, have you ever hidden your true self just to see someone's real face? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true life stories told straight from the heart. I've always believed that silence is power. People talk too much, show too much, and end up giving away every card they hold. That's why, for most of my life, I let others think I was ordinary, just another working woman with tired hands and secondhand shoes. The truth? I built an empire out of mops and bleach. For 35 years, I ran one of the largest private cleaning service companies in the state. Over 10,000 employees, contracts with luxury hotels, hospitals, and even government buildings. But I never bragged about it. I still drove my 10-year-old Toyota, wore plain jeans, and carried the same canvas bag I'd used since my daughter Amelia went to college. No one ever suspected that Mrs. Carter, the modest lady from the suburbs, was signing six-figure checks every month. And that's exactly how I wanted it. I grew up poor, dirt poor. My mother scrubbed floors for families who barely looked at her face. I used to promise myself that one day, if I ever had money, I'd treat every cleaner, every janitor, every dishwasher like a human being. I kept that promise. Maybe that's why I never looked down on anyone, not even when I had every right to look down from a penthouse window. Then Amelia met Daniel Moreau. Daniel was charming, handsome, successful. The kind of man every mother hopes her daughter will find. At least that's what I thought the first time I met him. But then I met his mother, Victoria Moreau, a woman who could turn a compliment into a weapon. She smiled with her mouth, but her eyes were always calculating, scanning, measuring. I could almost hear her thinking, "What's your worth? What can you offer my son?" Still, I bit my tongue. Amelia loved Daniel, and he seemed to love her. After their engagement, the Moreaus invited me to their mansion in Westlake Hills for a family welcome dinner. It sounded harmless, a polite evening to get to know each other. But something in Victoria's voice, when she called to invite me, made my stomach twist. "Of course, Mrs. Carter," she said sweetly. "It'll be simple, just family. Oh, don't worry about dressing up. We understand your background." That pause, that little hesitation before the word background, I'd heard it all my life. It's the way wealthy people say you don't belong here without using those words. After the call, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, staring at the old coffee mug in my hands. Part of me wanted to skip the dinner altogether. Another part, the stubborn, curious part, wanted to see who these people really were when they thought no one important was watching. That's when the idea came. What if I didn't show up as Amelia's mother? What if I showed up as someone invisible? I opened my closet and stared at the back row, the uniforms from my first years in business. Grey polyester, faded logo, a name tag that read Helen. It was my first company uniform. I hadn't worn it in decades. I ran my fingers over the fabric and smiled. If they wanted to look down on me, I'd give them a reason. I'd walk through their golden gates exactly the way my mother once did, as the help. Let's see how the mighty Moreaus treat a woman they think is beneath them. I hung the uniform on the door. Tomorrow night, I'd become Helen the cleaning lady again. Only this time, the mop belonged to me. The next afternoon, I laid the uniform across my bed and stared at it like it was an old photograph. The fabric had faded from years of bleach, the hem slightly frayed, but it still held the scent of soap and courage, the smell of the woman I used to be. I ironed it carefully, the way I used to when every crease mattered. Back then, a clean line on a uniform could mean the difference between keeping a job and being replaced. Funny how power hides in the smallest things. By 5 o'clock, I was ready. Grey uniform, simple black flats, no jewelry, no makeup. I tied my hair in a tight bun and left my gold watch on the dresser. The only thing I carried was a small tote bag with a box of cookies I'd baked that morning, oatmeal raisin, Amelia's favourite. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I barely recognised the woman staring back. She looked tired, humble, harmless, perfect. The taxi driver glanced at me through the mirror as we drove uphill toward Westlake Hills. "You work around here, ma'am?" he asked. I smiled faintly. "Something like that." He nodded, not pressing further. Most people don't ask questions when they think they already know the answer. The Moreau mansion appeared at the top of the hill like a scene out of a magazine, all glass, marble, and silence. Even the air felt expensive. A valet in a black suit opened my door. He looked confused when he saw me. Ma'am, deliveries go to the side entrance." I almost laughed. "Thank you, I'm expected." He hesitated, but I walked past him before he could say more. Inside, the foyer was enormous. High ceilings, chandeliers, and white marble so polished I could see my reflection in it. 3 maids were bustling around, placing silver cutlery and arranging fresh flowers. They looked nervous, moving like soldiers under command. Then I heard her voice. "Who are you?" Victoria Moreau stood at the bottom of the staircase, wrapped in a silk robe the colour of champagne. Her expression was all pearls and poison. "I'm Helen," I said softly. "I'm here for dinner." Her eyes swept over my uniform. "Dinner? Oh, you must be one of the servers. The kitchen is that way." Before I could answer, a young butler appeared behind her and whispered something in her ear. Victoria frowned, then forced a brittle smile. "Ah, you must be Amelia's mother." The silence that followed could have cracked glass. Her gaze darted from my shoes to my tote bag, then to my hair. I could almost hear the judgment echoing inside her head. She stepped closer, voice sugar-coated and sharp. "My dear, we didn't expect such a humble presentation, but I suppose simplicity has its charm." I smiled. I find it easier to breathe when I don't have diamonds choking my neck. For a split second, her mask cracked, a twitch at the corner of her mouth. Then she turned. "Well, come in. Daniel and Amelia are in the dining room." The hall stretched endlessly, lined with art pieces that probably cost more than my first house. At the far end of the room, I saw them, my daughter, glowing and nervous, and her husband, looking like he wanted to disappear. Amelia's smile faltered when she saw me. "Mum," she whispered, eyes darting between me and Victoria. "Why are you—" "Darling," Victoria interrupted, "your mother was kind enough to dress for the occasion." Her laugh was thin, brittle. I took my seat at the far end of the table, where no one had bothered to pull out a chair for me. It didn't matter. I'd pulled out heavier chairs in my life. The waiter poured wine. Victoria looked at me with a faint smirk. "Would you like some, Helen?" she asked. "Just water," I said calmly. She nodded as if confirming a suspicion. Every word, every glance felt like a test I had already passed. They thought I was small. They thought I was harmless. Good. Because that's when people show who they really are. The table could have fed 20 people, yet there were only 5 of us. Victoria and her husband Richard at the head, Daniel and Amelia on the right, and me, the help, at the far end. Every detail screamed luxury, crystal glasses, imported orchids, silver that probably had a last name. But the air felt colder than the marble floors. Victoria was the first to speak. "So, Helen," she began, twisting my name like a lemon peel in a cocktail. "Tell us, what do you do for a living?" I folded my napkin neatly. "Oh, I manage a few cleaning contracts, small things." "Cleaning?" she repeated, eyes glinting. "How practical." Richard chuckled under his breath. "At least she's honest. Not everyone pretends to be more than they are." Their laughter was soft, polite, the kind that stings worse than an insult shouted. Amelia's face went pale. She glanced at me, silently begging me not to take the bait. I smiled instead. Honesty pays the bills. Victoria raised her glass. "In some neighbourhoods, perhaps, The waiter served the first course, soup in bowls so thin they looked transparent. Victoria leaned forward. Amelia tells me you live outside the city? Yes, I said. A small house in Crestview. Her eyebrows lifted. Oh, I see. Daniel grew up here, of course, in this house. It's been in the family for generations. We take pride in our roots. Roots, I thought. Funny word for people who only bloom where there's money. I'm sure your place is cozy, she added, voice dripping with sugar. It's home, I said. That's enough. Richard shifted in his chair. Do you have help, Mrs. Carter? A maid, perhaps? The irony almost made me laugh. Sometimes, I replied, when I need an extra hand. I suppose it must be difficult, Victoria said, dabbing her lips, keeping up with things on a limited income. Her tone was gentle, like a cat playing with a dying bird. I took a slow sip of water. I manage. I've learned how to make things shine with very little. That line made her blink. Just a fraction of a second. Then the smirk returned. Dinner moved on to the main course, steak, rare and expensive. Richard bragged about their vineyard in Napa, their vacation home in the Hamptons, the art collection they'd just insured for 8 figures. Victoria added details, always glancing at me for reaction. Have you ever been to Europe, Helen? I shook my head. Not yet. Oh, you should, she said, swirling her wine. You'd love Paris, the markets, the museums, the sophistication. Her words floated in the air, heavy with meaning. You don't belong there. Amelia tried to break the tension. Mom, Dad, please. Victoria cut her off with a wave. We're just making conversation, darling. I looked at my daughter and for the first time I saw her fear, not of them, but of losing their approval. It hurt more than all the insults combined. The dessert came next, golden chocolate spheres served with edible flowers. I barely touched mine. Victoria's gaze landed on my tote bag beside the chair. What's in there, dear? Cookies, I said simply. Cookies? Richard laughed. That's adorable. I nodded. They're Amelia's favourite. I baked them this morning. Victoria tilted her head. Oh, how quaint. We usually order ours from Paris, but homemade. That's charming. The way she said charming felt like a curse. I smiled politely, my voice steady. Well, mine are free. You can't put a price on love. That line made her blink again. Something about it unsettled her. Maybe because love was the one thing she couldn't buy in bulk. A moment later, she leaned toward Richard, whispering something I wasn't supposed to hear. But I caught it anyway. She's so plain. Poor Amelia. I hope it's not genetic. My fingers tightened around the fork. I took a deep breath and exhaled slowly, letting the words wash over me like cold water. I'd been insulted by richer people before, but never in front of my own daughter. I wanted to stand up, to scream, to tell them exactly who I was, but not yet, not tonight. Tonight, I was still Helen, the cleaning lady they could trample without consequence, and I needed them to believe that a little longer, because when the truth finally came out, it would burn hotter than any fire they'd ever played with. The clinking of silverware filled the silence. No one spoke for several seconds, as if words were too expensive to waste on someone like me. The chandelier above us glittered like frozen rain, throwing golden light on crystal and contempt. Victoria smiled, the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. So Helen, she began again, slicing her steak with surgical precision, you must be proud of Amelia. She's done well for herself, considering everything. I looked up. Considering what? Her knife paused midair. Oh, I mean her background, of course. Not everyone marries into a family like ours. Daniel's father worked very hard to build what we have. Success doesn't come to everyone. Richard chuckled and raised his glass. Especially not to those who clean up after success. It was meant to sound like a joke. It didn't. I smiled softly. You'd be surprised what you can learn while cleaning up after people you see things others miss. For the first time that evening, Richard didn't have a comeback. Victoria did. Well, that's very philosophical, she said. But I suppose humility is a virtue. One has to know their place in life, doesn't one? Amelia stiffened. Mother, please. Oh, relax, darling, Victoria purred. We're just having an honest conversation. I admire your mother's realism. I set my fork down, keeping my tone calm. Realism keeps people grounded. Otherwise, they start confusing arrogance with class. Her smile tightened. It was a small victory, but I took it. The waiter appeared, pouring more wine. Victoria gestured to him with a flick of her hand, like shooing away dust. Richard, remember the charity gala last month? She said suddenly. The one where that woman wore the same dress as the catering staff? Oh, what a tragedy, Richard laughed. That's what happens when you invite everyone. Then, with a glance at me, presentation matters, doesn't it? I looked at him and nodded. It does, but sometimes the people wearing aprons have more class than the ones in tuxedos. Amelia inhaled sharply. Daniel pressed his lips together. Victoria gave a soft, chilly laugh. You're quite bold, Helen. Experience gives you courage, I said, especially when you've seen the world from the ground up. The silence that followed was thick, not awkward, but dangerous. Every eye on me, testing, evaluating, and I just smiled, sipping my water. Victoria leaned back, crossing her legs elegantly. So, tell me, she said sweetly, how did you raise Amelia all by yourself? It must have been difficult. Her tone was pity wrapped in poison. It wasn't easy, I replied, but hard work has its rewards. Yes, she said quickly, of course, hard work. Though I must admit, it's remarkable she turned out so refined. Her gaze slid to her son. Daniel always did have a soft spot for helping people. It's one of his virtues. Helping people. That one landed hard, as if marrying my daughter was an act of charity. Amelia dropped her napkin. Mother, Victoria ignored her. I only mean love can be generous. Don't you think, Richard? He grunted in agreement, swirling his wine. I stayed silent. There are moments when silence is louder than shouting. And right then, my silence was screaming. The conversation moved on to investments, politics, travel, subjects they wielded like weapons. Every story they told ended with how much something cost. Vacations weren't described by memories but by numbers. It was all a language of money, one they assumed I couldn't understand. At one point, Victoria asked, Have you ever been to Greece, Helen? The blue water is divine. I shook my head. Oh, that's a shame. Everyone should see the Aegean at least once. It's life-changing. I've seen it, I said quietly. She blinked. You have? From a window, I added. During a layover. Still beautiful. That earned a thin laugh from Richard. Adorable. I felt Amelia's hand brush my arm under the table. A quiet apology, desperate and small. I squeezed her fingers once, then let go. It wasn't her fault. Not yet. Dessert arrived, creme brulee with gold flakes. Victoria tapped her spoon against the dish. Gold, she said. Real gold. Can you imagine, Helen? Some people never see it up close. I looked at the dessert, then at her. I prefer things that melt, I said. Gold just sits there, useless. Richard coughed to hide a laugh. Victoria's eyes narrowed. The temperature in the room dropped a few degrees. No one realized it, but the storm had already started, and I was done pretending not to feel the thunder. By the time dessert plates were cleared, the polite cruelty had turned into something heavier, a kind of arrogance that no longer needed to hide behind smiles. Victoria leaned forward, elbows on the table, her diamond bracelet catching the chandelier light. Well, she began, her voice calm but deliberate. Since we're all family now, I think we should discuss something practical. Richard cleared his throat. Yes, finances, expectations, the future. It's important to be realistic. The word realistic again. always used by the rich when they're about to insult you with style. I didn't respond, I just folded my napkin neatly on my lap. Victoria's eyes stayed fixed on me, like a cat watching a mouse that hasn't realized it's trapped yet. You see, she continued, Daniel and Amelia are starting a new life, a beautiful life, and of course we want to support them in every possible way. I nodded slightly. That's kind of you. She smiled, sharp and false. We've helped them with the house down payment, the honeymoon, the furniture. We believe in giving them the best foundation possible. Her husband added proudly, nearly 100,000 in total, but we don't mind. Family comes first. My fingers tightened around the napkin. That wasn't generosity. That was accounting disguised as love. Victoria sighed dramatically. But we also know young couples face pressure, emotional, financial, social, and we want to make sure nothing, her gaze sharpened, nothing gets in the way of their peace. There it was, the opening move. What do you mean? I asked, though I already knew. She exchanged a look with Richard, then smiled. Let's be honest, Helen. You've done your best, raising Amelia alone. Admirable, really, but it must have been exhausting. I stayed silent. You work so hard, she went on, and I can't imagine how difficult it must be to manage everything on your own at your age. She took a sip of wine, then set the glass down. That's why Richard and I have been thinking, perhaps we could help you. Help me? Yes, financially. Just a little support to make your life more comfortable. Say, $700 a month? I blinked. 700. Her tone turned honey sweet. Yes, a small allowance. Enough to ease things for you and to ensure Amelia and Daniel can focus on their own lives without worrying about you. There it was, the insult wrapped as charity. You mean, I said slowly, you want to pay me to stay out of their lives? Her eyes widened with mock innocence. Oh, Helen, don't be dramatic. It's not about staying away. It's about giving everyone some space. You know how young couples need freedom. Richard nodded. Exactly. It's just practical. Everyone wins. Amelia's face turned white. Mom, please stop. Daniel rubbed his temples. Mother, this isn't... Victoria raised her hand, silencing them. We're talking as adults. Helen understands. I did. Oh, I understood perfectly. They thought they were buying silence. They thought they were buying me. I looked at Amelia. Her eyes shimmered with tears she didn't dare shed. Daniel avoided my gaze altogether. The air felt heavier now, like it was pressing down on my chest. My ears rang faintly, the sound that comes when rage meets heartbreak. I smiled slowly. That's a generous offer, Victoria. Truly. Relief flickered across her face. I'm glad you see it that way. But, I said, my tone even, just to be clear, how much did you say again? $700 a month. $700, I repeated, to make me disappear. Her smile faltered. That's not what I said. It's what you meant, I said softly. For a moment, no one breathed. Even the waiter, standing near the door, froze. Richard tried to laugh it off. Let's not get emotional, it's just a suggestion. I turned to him. I'm not emotional, I'm calculating. He frowned. Calculating what? How much respect $700 buys these days? No one spoke. Victoria's face hardened. Helen, there's no need for hostility. We're trying to help. I know, I said. That's the problem. You think help is measured in dollars. You think kindness has a receipt. Amelia finally stood. Mom, let's go, please. I didn't move. I wanted them to finish their performance, to show every card. Victoria sighed, tired of pretending. Look, dear, we're just trying to make this easier for everyone. You've had your struggles. We all have. But our family has certain standards. Appearances matter. And I ruin yours, I said. She didn't deny it. That was the moment something inside me shifted. A quiet click, like a lock turning. I realized they had no idea who they were talking to. I wasn't a poor mother begging for scraps. I was the woman who had built something from nothing, the woman who signed paychecks for people who probably cleaned their pool, but they didn't know, not yet. I smiled, folded my napkin neatly, and placed it on the table. "Thank you for dinner," I said calmly, "and for your offer." Richard looked relieved. "So you'll think about it?" "I already have," I said, standing up, "and I know exactly how to respond." Victoria tilted her head. "Oh?" "Yes," I said, meeting her eyes, "but not tonight." I turned toward the door. Behind me, the silence was deafening, because they didn't know it yet, but that dinner was about to cost them far more than $700. I didn't slam the door when I left. People like Victoria expect drama, shouting, tears, humiliation, but true power doesn't storm out. It walks away quietly and lets the silence do the damage. The valet rushed toward me, offering to call a car. I waved him off and walked down the marble driveway myself, the night air sharp against my skin. The mansion glowed behind me, all glass and light, beautiful from afar, rotten inside. Every step I took, I could still hear Victoria's voice echoing in my head. $700 should help. Help what exactly? My dignity? My distance? My disappearance? I reached the gate and looked back once. For years, I'd taught my employees to clean with care, that how you treat a space says everything about who you are. That house, for all its polish, reeked of something no soap could wash away: arrogance. I drove home in silence. The city lights blurred through the windshield and I could feel my hands shaking, not from sadness, but from something colder. Rage, yes, but also clarity. You see, there are two kinds of anger. The first burns hot, loud, reckless, impulsive. The second burns cold, slow, deliberate, precise. Mine was the second kind. By the time I reached my little house in Crestview, I already knew what I was going to do. I brewed a cup of tea, chamomile to calm my nerves, and sat by the window. The uniform still clung to my body, smelling faintly of bleach and shame. I unbuttoned it slowly, folded it neatly, and set it aside. Then I walked into my bedroom closet and pulled out the other side of my life, the one no one at that table had ever seen. Tailored blazers, silk shirts, a black leather briefcase, and on the top shelf, a small velvet box that held my company's platinum identification badge. Helena Carter, founder and CEO, Carter Clean Systems, Inc. I ran my thumb over the engraved letters, the same name Victoria had mocked not 2 hours ago, the same woman she'd offered $700 to vanish. I laughed softly, but it wasn't amusement, it was disbelief at how easily people confuse money with power. If only she knew, if only she had looked closer. Half the staff cleaning her mansion belonged to my company. I had signed their paychecks that very morning. The irony was exquisite. I'd been sitting in her dining room while her housekeeper, my employee, had probably been polishing her silverware in the next room. And now I had a decision to make. I could walk away, keep my secret, and let them drown in their own ignorance. Or I could show them exactly who they'd been dealing with. The first option would be peaceful, the second, satisfying. I sipped my tea and looked at the clock. It was nearly midnight, too late to call Amelia, too early to sleep. Instead, I opened my laptop and typed an email to my regional operations manager. Tomorrow morning, I'll personally inspect the Moreau estate. Tell the team to prepare a surprise audit, full staff presence. I want everything spotless. I hit send. A strange calm settled over me. For the first time that night, I wasn't angry. I was focused. I went to bed, but I didn't dream. When you've been underestimated long enough, you stop dreaming. You start planning. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The sky was pink, the air crisp, the kind of morning that makes you believe in second chances. Except this wasn't about belief, it was about balance. I dressed simply but elegantly, a charcoal grey suit, pearl earrings, black heels. My reflection in the mirror didn't look like Helen anymore. It looked like the woman who built an empire with her own two hands and was about to remind a family of what real class looked like. I grabbed my briefcase, slipped my company badge inside, and took one last sip of coffee before heading out the door. Today, I wasn't going back to the Moreau mansion as a guest. I was going back as the owner. When I pulled up to the Moreau mansion the next morning, the sunlight was blinding against the white marble. It looked different in daylight, less majestic, more sterile, the kind of beauty that hides behind polish. A pair of gardeners paused as I stepped out of my car. This time I didn't arrive in a taxi. I arrived in a black Lexus, company issued, with the Carter Clean Systems logo discreetly printed on the license plate frame. I was wearing a dark tailored suit and low heels, no uniform, no tote bag, just calm authority. As I walked up the steps, the same valet from the night before straightened immediately. "Good morning, ma'am," he said, almost saluting. "Mrs. Carter, right? You're here for the inspection?" I nodded. "Yes, regional quality review. Is Mrs. Moreau home?" His eyes widened slightly. He must have heard the name on the work order. "Yes, ma'am. She and Mr. Moreau are inside." "Perfect," I said, and pushed open the grand door. The moment I stepped in, 3 housekeepers froze. They were in the middle of dusting the foyer statues. They recognized me instantly. I could see it in their faces. "Good morning," I greeted them warmly. "Please continue, I'm only here to observe." They nodded rapidly, a mix of respect and terror, the kind employees reserve for the woman who signs their paychecks. Victoria's voice drifted from the living room. "Tell whoever's at the door we're not expecting guests." Then she appeared, her silk robe replaced by a pale blue suit, diamonds still hanging from her ears, coffee cup in hand. She stopped mid-step when she saw me. For a full 2 seconds, she couldn't speak. Then her mouth opened, but the sound that came out wasn't quite words. "You—" "Good morning, Mrs. Moreau." I smiled politely, the way I'd done 1,000 times in business meetings. "I hope I'm not interrupting. I'm here for a scheduled inspection." "Inspection?" she repeated, blinking. "Yes, Carter Clean Systems. You use our staff." I gestured lightly toward the cleaners behind her. "I'm the founder." The colour drained from her face. She looked at the maids, then back at me, as if reality had just played a cruel joke. "That's impossible," she murmured. "Nothing's impossible with hard work," I said softly. "Is Mr. Moreau available? He should be aware we'll be conducting a full review." She swallowed hard. I'll get him." Her heels clicked away, uneven. I turned to one of the maids, a petite woman named Maria. "Have you been treated well here?" I asked quietly. Her eyes darted toward the hallway, then back to me. She hesitated, then whispered, "They yell sometimes, but we need the job." I nodded. Noted. Moments later, Richard appeared, still adjusting his tie. When his eyes landed on me, confusion flickered, then recognition, then horror. You were—" "Yes," I said. "Last night's dinner guest, and your cleaning contractor." He stood frozen, jaw tightening, unsure whether to apologize or pretend confidence. "Mrs. Carter, I don't understand." "You will." I motioned to the clipboard in my hand. "We're conducting a surprise audit. Your staff performance, treatment, and environment are under evaluation. Company policy." He blinked. "But you can't just walk in like—" "I can," I cut in gently. "It's in your service agreement, Section 12. I smiled. "You signed it." Victoria returned, pale and trembling, her smile stretched like glass. "Well," she said weakly, "this is quite a surprise." "Yes," I said. "Life tends to be that way when you underestimate people." Daniel and Amelia entered then, drawn by the noise. Amelia froze at the sight of me in my suit. Her eyes filled instantly. "Mum," she whispered. "Morning, darling." I gave her a calm smile. "I had some unfinished business." Victoria found her voice again. "This is humiliating," she snapped. "You planned this, didn't you?" I met her gaze. "I planned to see who you really were. You did the rest." Richard stepped closer, voice low and defensive. If you think this gives you power over us, you're mistaken. I tilted my head. Oh, Richard, power doesn't come from money. It comes from knowing when to use it. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I looked around the room, the gleaming marble floors, the spotless glass, the scent of expensive emptiness. My company maintains houses like yours every day, I said quietly. But what you really need, Mrs. Moreau, is a deep clean on the inside. Silence. You could have heard a feather drop. Then I smiled again, professional and poised. Please don't worry. Today's inspection will be quick. I'm only checking that everyone here understands what respect looks like. And as I walked past her, clipboard in hand, the entire mansion seemed to shrink around me, all its gold and glass suddenly worthless. For the first time, Victoria Moreau didn't have a single thing left to polish. They followed me into the living room like ghosts chasing the living. No one spoke. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. The same chandelier that had glowed over dinner now looked harsher in daylight, exposing the cracks and dust that hid beneath its shine. Funny how light has a way of revealing what darkness politely ignores. I turned to face them. Victoria stood stiffly, her jaw tight. Richard hovered near the bar, pretending to pour himself coffee but missing the cup twice. Daniel and Amelia lingered by the stairs, torn between horror and curiosity. I'd like to start our review with something simple, I said evenly. Transparency. Victoria crossed her arms. This is absurd. You can't just walk into our home and… Actually, I can, I interrupted gently. You signed the contract. Every property using Carter Clean Systems agrees to random quality checks. It protects both client and employee. She opened her mouth, then shut it again. I'll be honest, I continued. I didn't plan for it to happen this way, but last night clarified a few things for me. My tone was calm, but each word carried weight. When someone offers you $700 to erase yourself from your child's life, you learn what kind of dirt truly matters. Amelia gasped softly. Mom, please. It's okay, I said, turning toward her. You didn't make the offer, but you sat at that table and heard it. And now you'll hear this. I faced Victoria again. I built my company from scratch, started with a mop and a borrowed vacuum. I cleaned offices by day, studied business management at night. When banks refused me loans, I saved every penny until I could hire my first 2 employees. I took a step closer. That was 30 years ago. Today, Carter Clean Systems operates in 15 states, employs over 10,000 workers, and services properties worth more than your entire portfolio. Richard's hand trembled. The coffee cup clinked against the counter. Victoria stared, eyes wide, her confidence slipping like makeup under rain. I didn't come here to impress you, I said. I came here to remind you that respect doesn't come from money. It comes from how you treat people when you think they have none. She swallowed hard. You lied to us. You pretended to be someone else. Yes, I said simply. I wanted to see how you'd treat someone you couldn't gain anything from, and you didn't disappoint. Her eyes flashed. That's manipulation. No, I said. That's education. You just learned a very expensive lesson for free. Richard stepped forward. You think humiliating us makes you better? I looked at him steadily. No, Richard. It just makes me honest. Something money can't buy. He glared. You're proud of this? Of deceiving us? I'm proud that I never needed to pretend I was better than anyone, I said quietly. You, on the other hand, can't seem to function without proving it. Victoria's lip trembled. She tried to laugh, but it came out broken. I don't believe you, she whispered. No one hides success like that. People like you show off. I took out my wallet and laid my black corporate card on the coffee table. Her eyes locked on it, glossy, heavy, engraved with silver letters. Helena Carter, founder, CEO. Some people show off, I said. Others build. The silence that followed was almost sacred. Even the maids had stopped working. They stood at the edges of the room, listening, watching history clean itself. I turned to Maria, the housekeeper. Would you please bring your supervisor? She nodded quickly and hurried off. When the supervisor arrived, a middle-aged woman in uniform, I handed her a small folder. Effective immediately, I said. The Moreau estate is suspended from our platinum client list pending review. Any mistreatment of staff during employment will be investigated. Do you understand? The woman's eyes widened. Yes, ma'am. Victoria went pale. You can't do that. We pay for the highest. I cut her off. You can't buy the highest. You earn it. She stared at me, shaking. You're ruining our reputation. I tilted my head slightly. No, I'm revealing it. Daniel stepped forward. Mom, enough. His voice cracked, the first sign of a man torn between loyalty and truth. He turned to me. Mrs. Carter, I'm sorry, truly. I didn't know. I believed him. There was shame in his voice, and something else, understanding. Amelia's eyes filled again. Mom, she whispered. I didn't stop them. I should have, but I froze. I was scared. I know, I said softly. That's what fear does. It silences good people while the wrong ones keep talking. Victoria's breathing grew shallow. I can't believe this. You humiliated us in our own home. I looked around the grand room, the marble floors, the gold frames, the spotless furniture. Your home is cleaner than most, I said, but your heart's filthy. Richard slammed his palm against the counter. That's enough. I met his glare calmly. Finally, something we agree on. I picked up my card from the table, slid it back into my wallet, and turned toward the door. Inspection complete, I said. But don't worry, Mrs. Moreau. I'll make sure your staff gets treated better from now on. And as I walked out, I could feel every ounce of their wealth shrinking behind me. For once, the only thing in that mansion worth anything was silence. I was halfway to the door when I heard my name. Mrs. Carter, please. It was Daniel. His voice cracked like a man waking from a dream. I stopped but didn't turn around. Behind me, Victoria's sobs came sharp and uneven, like glass breaking underwater. The sound didn't move me. It just existed, the way thunder does after lightning. Daniel hurried closer. I had no idea, he said. About your company, about anything. I'm so sorry. I faced him. His eyes were wet but steady. You didn't have to know, I said. But you could have listened. Sometimes silence is louder than cruelty. He lowered his head. You're right. Amelia stood behind him, trembling, her hands twisted in front of her. She looked like the little girl I used to tuck in after long work shifts, the same guilt, the same need to make things right. Mom, she whispered. Please don't hate me. I don't, I said, but I need you to see the world the way it really is. You married into a house that mistakes wealth for worth. You can't let it teach you that. Richard cleared his throat from across the room. He was trying to regain control the way men like him always do, by pretending control was never lost. This has gone far enough, he said. We all said things we didn't mean. I looked straight at him. You meant every word. You just didn't think I'd ever have the power to answer. His jaw tightened. You can't judge us based on one night. I'm not judging, I said quietly. I'm remembering. That shut him up. Victoria finally lifted her head. Her mascara had run in thin black rivers. You came here to destroy us, she said hoarsely. You planned all of this. I shook my head. No, Victoria. I came here to meet my daughter's in-laws. You destroyed yourselves. She let out a bitter laugh. You think you're better than us. I don't need to be better, I replied. Just honest. I turned toward Amelia. Honey, get your things. We're leaving. She hesitated. Leaving? Yes. You don't have to live in a palace to feel safe. You just need a place without poison. Daniel's voice wavered. If she goes, I go. Victoria gasped. Daniel, don't you dare. He cut her off. Mother, stop. I love Amelia, and I'm ashamed of what we did. For a moment, no one breathed. I saw something flicker in his eyes. Courage, maybe, or freedom. The kind that money can't afford. Victoria slumped back onto the sofa, her voice fading to a whisper. All these years I worked so hard for respect, and now look at me. I wanted to feel pity, I really did. But pity without change is just permission. Respect, I said softly, doesn't live in marble or gold. It lives in how people remember your kindness after you leave the room. You might still have a chance to find it, but not by buying it. Her eyes glistened. You think forgiveness makes you noble? No, I said. It makes me free. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper, the service termination notice for the Moreau estate. I placed it on the coffee table. You'll need to find another cleaning service. My employees deserve better clients. Victoria's hand trembled as she stared at the paper. You can't humiliate us like this. I smiled faintly. I'm not humiliating you, Victoria. You did that when you offered me $700. Amelia looked at me. What happens now? Now, I said. We start over, separately, if we must, but with clean consciences. I turned to go. Richard muttered something under his breath, a curse maybe, or a prayer. Either way, it didn't matter. As I stepped outside, the morning sun hit my face. The air smelled of cut grass and rain, fresh and unapologetic. For the first time in years, I felt weightless. Amelia caught up with me at the car. Mom, she said, I don't know how to fix this. You don't, I replied. You learn from it. That's enough. Daniel followed a few steps behind, silent but determined. Will you ever forgive my parents? He asked. I looked at him, really looked at him. The man my daughter loved, the son of the people who tried to buy my absence. Forgiveness isn't a gift, I said. It's a process. Tell them when they start cleaning their hearts. I'll consider it. He nodded slowly. Before getting into my car, I looked back one last time at the mansion, a gleaming shell of pride and insecurity. Through the open door, I saw Victoria sitting motionless, staring at the termination notice as if it were a mirror. Maybe it was. Because sometimes, losing control is the only way people like her ever see who they really are. I closed the car door, started the engine, and whispered to myself, let's see how they handle life without someone else cleaning up their mess. The tires rolled down the long driveway, and the mansion grew smaller in the mirror, like a stain finally washed away. By the time I got home, the adrenaline was gone, and the silence of my little house felt louder than any argument. The coffee cup I'd left on the table that morning was still there, cold and untouched, like proof that I had woken up a different woman. I kicked off my heels, set my briefcase on the counter, and let out a long, shaky breath. It was over. The humiliation, the pretending, the poisonous smiles. But the victory felt hollow. You don't walk away from something like that unchanged. Even when you win, part of you still bleeds. I stood by the window, watching a neighbour walk her dog down the quiet street. Normal life, small, peaceful, predictable. How strange that I had built an empire, yet all I ever really wanted was a moment like that, a morning without tension. My phone buzzed on the counter. It was Amelia. For a moment, I considered not answering. Then I did. Mom? Her voice trembled. I'm here, I said softly. I don't even know where to start, she whispered. They're fighting. Dad's yelling. Mom's crying. Daniel tried to calm them down, but they're blaming each other. They said you ruined everything. I closed my eyes. No, darling, I didn't ruin anything. I just took off the mask. They're the ones who were afraid of what they'd see underneath. There was silence on the line, then a small sob. I'm so sorry I didn't defend you, Amelia said. I was so scared to make things worse. You don't owe me an apology, I told her. Fear makes people freeze. It's what they count on. I heard Daniel's voice faintly in the background. He wants to talk to you, Amelia whispered. Then his voice came through, rough, tired, honest. Mrs. Carter, I can't defend what they did. I can only say I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that. No one does, I said. But the lesson wasn't for me, Daniel. It was for you too. Now you know who they really are. He exhaled. I know, but I also know they're my parents, and I don't know how to move forward. By drawing boundaries, I said quietly. Respect isn't inherited, it's earned, even between parents and children. He was silent for a long moment. Then, almost in a whisper, you really scared my mother. I didn't mean to scare her, I said. I meant to wake her up. There's a difference. After the call, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. The afternoon sun slanted through the blinds, cutting the room into stripes of light and shadow, half peace, half unrest. That's what the truth does. It divides before it heals. I thought about Victoria's face when I told her who I was, the disbelief, the cracks in her confidence. For a second, I almost felt pity. Almost. Then I remembered the way she'd said $700 should help. No. Pity was for those who didn't know better. She did. The phone buzzed again, another message, this time from Daniel. I've moved us to a hotel for a few days. Amelia's with me. She's shaken but safe. We're figuring out what to do next. I smiled faintly. Good. Sometimes healing begins away from the house that made you sick. I typed back, take your time and don't hate them. Hate turns into the same thing you're trying to escape. Then I set the phone down and looked around my small kitchen. The same chipped counter, the same old kettle, the same mismatched plates. It wasn't much, but it was mine. It was clean, simple, and honest. Everything their mansion wasn't. Still, a strange ache settled in my chest, because even when the righteous win, we lose something too. I had exposed them, but I had also hurt my daughter in the process. No matter how noble your reason, truth always burns someone. I walked to the living room and sat down on the couch. The faint hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. I thought about calling Victoria just once to see if she'd say something, anything human. But then I remembered the look in her eyes. There was no space for humility there, only pride wrapped in pain. So instead, I whispered to the quiet room, let her sit with it. Let the silence do the talking. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, soft, steady, cleansing. I watched them trail down the window pane like small threads of forgiveness I wasn't ready to weave yet. For the first time in years, I didn't need to pretend. I didn't need to be strong or composed. I just let myself feel the exhaustion, the relief, the loneliness that always follows truth. Because truth, no matter how pure, always leaves ashes. And sometimes you have to sit in them a while before something new can grow. It was nearly midnight when the phone rang again. The rain had stopped, but the thunder still rolled far away, like the memory of a fight that refused to end. I almost didn't pick up. Part of me wanted to let it ring, to stay wrapped in the quiet. But something told me this call would matter. Mom? It was Amelia, voice shaky and small. Sweetheart, where are you? At the hotel. Daniel's asleep. I can't. Her breath hitched. I can't stop hearing them. Hearing who? She hesitated. My parents, they called earlier. They were screaming at each other. I closed my eyes. What happened? She took a deep breath and started talking, fast, nervous, like the words had been waiting all day to escape. Amelia's retelling. When Daniel and I left, Victoria, she started yelling. She said I'd humiliated her, that you had set her up. Dad tried to calm her down, but then she turned on him. You let that woman embarrass us in our own home, she screamed. And he shouted back, because you couldn't keep your mouth shut long enough to show some class. I'd never heard them like that before. It wasn't anger, it was exposure. Two people who'd built their lives on control suddenly realizing they'd lost it. Then Dad said something I'll never forget. He said, all these years I thought we were respected. Turns out people were just afraid of us. and she slapped him right there in front of the staff. After that, the house went quiet. No one dared breathe. Mum sat down on the floor, not the sofa, the floor. Her diamonds were still on, but she looked empty. Dad left the room without a word. I heard him slam the study door. That's when she whispered, "She planned this. She wanted to destroy me." But the way she said it, Mum, it didn't sound like hatred. It sounded like grief. I listened without interrupting. The rain outside had stopped completely. Even the streetlights hummed softer. When Amelia finally went silent, I asked quietly, "Do you think she understood what she did?" "I don't know," she said, but for the first time she looked scared, not of you, of herself. That made me pause. People like Victoria don't fear humiliation, they fear the mirror. I leaned back in my chair. "She needed that fear," I said softly. Sometimes that's the only way to make people stop hurting others, when they finally feel the sting themselves. Amelia sniffled. "Do you think she'll change?" "Change isn't a switch," I said. "It's a bruise. It hurts before it heals." There was a long silence. Then she said, "Mum, I think Daniel and I are going to move. Somewhere small, away from all of it." I smiled faintly. "Good. Build your own peace. Don't inherit theirs." Her voice steadied. "I love you. I love you too, darling. Always." When the call ended, I stayed on the couch, phone still in hand, staring into the dark. Through the window, the clouds were breaking apart, thin ribbons of moonlight spilling across my living room floor. That image stayed with me, light finding its way through ruins. The next morning, I opened my laptop out of habit and checked company emails. Among the invoices and reports, one message caught my eye. Subject line, "Service cancellation, Moreau residence." It was automatic, sent by accounting after I'd signed the termination. But seeing it in print made something inside me twist. I hovered over the delete button, then stopped. Instead, I opened the file and scrolled to the comment section. There was a short note attached, added that morning by my regional manager. "Client requested a meeting to apologise. Mrs. Moreau insists on speaking with you personally." I stared at the words for a long time. Apologise. Such a small word for something so heavy. I closed the laptop without replying. Not yet. People think power is about control, but real power is knowing when not to use it. I walked to the window. The sun was rising, pale and new. My reflection looked older, calmer, the kind of calm that only comes after you've burned something down and realised you don't miss the smoke. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible, and I didn't feel angry. I just felt clean. That day, I didn't answer any calls, not from clients, not from friends. I spent the morning watering my plants, scrubbing my sink, and baking cookies, the same oatmeal raisin ones that had sat untouched at that cursed dinner. It wasn't revenge anymore, it was peace. And when I placed the tray on the counter, still warm and sweet, I thought, maybe one day, when Victoria's ready to face her reflection, I'll save her one. 3 days passed before I heard the knock. It was a soft, uncertain sound, not the kind that announces itself, but the kind that asks for permission. When I opened the door, I didn't recognise her at first. Victoria Moreau stood there, drenched in the kind of humility that money can't fake. No diamonds, no silk, just a beige cardigan and trembling hands clutching a purse she wasn't sure what to do with. Her hair wasn't styled, her lipstick was gone. Her eyes, those sharp, glassy eyes that once sliced through every room, were swollen and bare. She looked small, human. "Mrs. Carter," she said, her voice breaking on the first word. May I come in?" For a second, I thought about closing the door. Not out of anger, but self-preservation. Some wounds need silence, not visitors. But something in her face stopped me. Maybe it was the way she couldn't hold my gaze for more than a second, or maybe it was the simple truth that no one shows up like this unless they've been stripped of all their armor. I stepped aside. "Come in." She hesitated before entering, as if afraid she might dirty the floor. Ironic, really. The scent of chamomile tea filled the room. I gestured toward the couch. Sit. She did, slowly, like someone sitting on sacred ground. Her fingers twisted the strap of her purse until it squeaked. I wasn't sure you'd see me, she said finally. I almost didn't, I replied, but curiosity got the better of me. She nodded, staring at the table. There was a long silence. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet, just the sound of wind brushing against the windows. Then, in a voice barely louder than a whisper, she said, I came to apologize. The words hung there, fragile, trembling, real. I didn't say anything. I wanted her to keep going. I've spent the last 3 days thinking about everything you said, she continued, about money, respect, class, all of it. And I realized, her voice cracked. I don't know what any of it means anymore. I folded my hands in my lap. That's a good place to start. She looked up at me for the first time. I was raised to believe success made people better. That wealth was proof of worth. My parents drilled it into me. Never be poor, never be small. I carried that fear my whole life until it became who I was. And then, when I saw you, you reminded me of everything I'd tried to bury. I leaned forward slightly. And what's that? That I used to be kind, she whispered, before I learned how to look down. The confession came out like a sob she'd been holding for decades. I said nothing. Sometimes silence is the only language forgiveness understands. I can't undo what I said, she went on, and I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed you to know that I see it now. I see myself. Her hands shook as she reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. I also came to return this. Inside was a check, the refund from my company's termination fee. I smiled faintly. You didn't need to. I did, she insisted, because I finally understand what you meant when you said respect isn't for sale. She hesitated, then added softly, I envy you, you know. The way you carry peace like it's something you earned. I have everything and still feel empty. I studied her for a moment. She wasn't lying. This wasn't the voice of a woman protecting pride. It was the voice of someone who had finally met herself in the wreckage. Victoria, I said quietly, peace doesn't come from what you own. It comes from what you can live without. Her eyes filled again. I don't know if I can change, she admitted. People like me, we don't even know how to start. I took a slow sip of tea. Start small. Say thank you to people who can't do anything for you. Sit in silence without trying to fill it. And when you feel the urge to judge, remember tonight. Remember how it felt to sit in a stranger's living room, asking for mercy. She nodded, tears falling freely now. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The rain started again, soft, forgiving. Finally, she whispered, I wish I'd met you before I became who I am. I smiled gently. You just did. When she stood to leave, I walked her to the door. At the threshold, she turned to me. You said once that money doesn't buy class. I thought that was an insult. Now I think it's the most generous thing anyone's ever told me. I nodded. Because it means you can still have it. She looked at me one last time, then stepped into the rain. No umbrella, no chauffeur, just a woman finally walking in her own truth. I watched her until she disappeared down the street, her beige cardigan slowly darkening under the drizzle. And for the first time since that dinner, my chest loosened. Not because she apologized, but because she meant it. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets washed clean, shining under the soft light of dawn. My living room still smelled faintly of chamomile and rain, and of something else too. Peace. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat by the window, watching the neighborhood slowly wake up. For the first time in days, my heart wasn't heavy, it wasn't light either, it just was. The knock from the night before echoed in my head. timid, hesitant, real. Victoria's face, wet with tears and stripped of pride, kept returning to me. There was no satisfaction in remembering it, only clarity. I had spent a lifetime cleaning up after others, their messes, their dirt, their carelessness. But last night, something different had been cleaned. Not the marble floors of her mansion, but the residue of resentment that had clung to me since that dinner. And that kind of clean doesn't come from soap, it comes from honesty. My phone buzzed beside me. Amelia. I smiled softly before answering. "Good morning, sweetheart." "Mum," she said, her voice warm but cautious. "Daniel told me his mother came to see you." "She did." Silence on the other end. Then, carefully, "How did it go?" "She apologized," I said simply. "And she meant it." I could almost hear Amelia's relief through the line. "Really? I didn't think she was capable of that." "She wasn't," I said. "Not until she lost everything she thought made her special." Amelia sighed. "She's been quiet since that night. Dad's still angry, but she's different. It's strange. I don't know if I should believe it." "People don't change overnight," I said, "but sometimes they break just enough to let the light in." There was a pause. Then Amelia whispered, "Did you forgive her?" The question hung in the air, heavier than it sounded. I looked out at the sky, pale blue streaked with silver. "I'm learning to," I said. "Forgiveness isn't a gift you hand out like a souvenir. It's a language, and sometimes you have to relearn how to speak it." She was quiet for a while, then said, "You sound softer today." "I'm not softer," I replied, "just less angry. Anger is useful when you're fighting, but after the fight's done, it turns toxic if you hold on to it." Amelia let out a small laugh. "You always make everything sound like poetry." "That's because life's messy," I said. "You have to find beauty in the cleanup." She chuckled again, then her tone turned serious. "Mom, I'm proud of you. The way you handled everything. You didn't yell. You didn't fight dirty. You just showed them who you were." "I wasn't trying to win," I told her. "I was trying to remind them, and you, that dignity doesn't need an audience." "I'll never forget that," she said softly. "Neither will Daniel. He keeps saying you taught him more about strength in one dinner than his parents did his whole life." "That's kind of him," I said, smiling. "Tell him strength isn't about control, it's about composure." The call went quiet again. Then Amelia said, "Mum, do you ever regret it? Pretending to be poor that night?" I thought for a moment. "No," I said, "because I didn't pretend to be poor. I pretended to be invisible. And it worked. They showed me exactly who they were when they thought I didn't matter." "And now?" she asked. "Now," I said, "I don't need to pretend anymore." She exhaled softly. "I think we're going to visit you this weekend. Just us. No drama, no apologies, just a quiet dinner." I smiled. "That sounds perfect. I'll make the cookies again. This time maybe someone will actually eat them." We both laughed. A real laugh, not the brittle kind that fills mansions. When the call ended, I stayed by the window, letting the sun hit my face. A soft warmth spread through me, the kind that doesn't shout, the kind that whispers, "You did the right thing." I thought again about Victoria. I didn't know if she'd truly change, but she had taken the first step, and sometimes that's enough. Because forgiveness isn't about erasing what happened. It's about refusing to let it control what happens next. Later that afternoon, I opened my old canvas tote, the same one I'd brought to that dinner, and found the folded grey uniform still inside, the one I'd worn to play a role. I held it for a moment, then pressed it to my chest. It smelled faintly of bleach, memory, and something I hadn't expected, closure. I didn't throw it away. Some reminders deserve to stay, not as shame, but as proof. Proof that sometimes you have to walk through humiliation to arrive at grace. Proof that forgiveness doesn't start with the person who wronged you. It starts when you decide you're done carrying their weight. I folded the uniform carefully, placed it back in the tote, and whispered, "We're done, Helen." The old me, the one who stayed quiet out of fear, who let others define her worth, could finally rest. And for the first time in my life, forgiveness didn't feel like surrender. It felt like freedom. The scent of roasted chicken filled my kitchen, blending with the buttery warmth of fresh bread and cinnamon. It was the kind of meal my mother used to make on Sundays. Simple, comforting, the kind that didn't need to impress anyone. I set the table with mismatched plates, a habit I'd never outgrown. To me, perfection never lived in symmetry. It lived in sincerity. The doorbell rang right on time. When I opened it, Amelia was standing there with Daniel, both carrying grocery bags and nervous smiles. "Something smells amazing," Daniel said, trying to sound casual but failing miserably. "It's chicken," I replied. "Don't get too excited. It's not catered from Paris." He laughed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Thank God, I've had enough fancy food to last a lifetime." Amelia rolled her eyes at him, then looked at me, really looked. Her eyes were softer now, the kind that had cried and healed and learned. "Mom," she said, stepping forward to hug me, "we missed you." I held her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, the one thing that hadn't changed since she was little. "I missed you too," I whispered. "Now come in before the food gets cold." They settled around the small wooden table, a sharp contrast to the marble one we'd shared that night at the Moreau mansion. But somehow this table felt bigger, as if honesty had a way of creating space. For a while no one spoke. The clinking of cutlery, the low hum of the refrigerator, the rhythm of rain outside, everything felt like a quiet symphony. Then Daniel broke the silence. "Mrs. Carter," he said, his voice steady but careful, "I owe you more than an apology. You taught me something I didn't know I needed to learn." I raised an eyebrow. "And what's that?" "That decency isn't automatic," he said. "It's a choice, one you have to make every day, even when it costs you comfort." I smiled. "That's a good start. Keep making that choice." He nodded, then glanced at Amelia, who gave him a small, proud smile. I could see it, the two of them, growing up right there at my table. Amelia turned to me. "Mum, I've been thinking a lot about that night, about how much I let other people's approval matter. I don't want to live like that anymore." "Then don't," I said simply. "You don't owe anyone the version of yourself that makes them comfortable." Her eyes shimmered. "I know. I just wish I'd realized it sooner." "You realized it when you were meant to," I said. "Life doesn't give us early warnings, just loud lessons." That made her laugh, the kind of laugh that finally belonged to her again. I poured tea for the three of us. Steam rose between us like a bridge, delicate but real. Daniel took a sip and said quietly, "My parents are changing, slowly. It's awkward, but it's something. Mum's been volunteering at a shelter downtown. She says she wants to learn humility. I think she's serious." I smiled faintly. "Good. Even marble can crack enough to let light through." He exhaled, relieved. "I didn't think you'd want to hear about them." "I do," I said. "Forgiveness doesn't mean cutting people out. It means letting them face themselves without us holding the mirror for them." He nodded, thoughtful. After dinner, we moved to the living room. Amelia helped clear the dishes while Daniel insisted on doing the washing. It was almost funny watching him try to handle my old sponge like it was a foreign object. "Careful," I teased. "That sponge has seen more battles than your mother's jewelry." He laughed, genuinely this time, and something about that sound told me we were going to be all right. When everything was cleaned up, Amelia joined me on the couch. Outside, the rain had stopped again, leaving the windows fogged with quiet. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "Mom?" "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd never gone to that dinner?" I chuckled softly. "Sometimes, but I think life has a funny way of forcing us into the rooms we need to walk through, even if it's just to find the door out." She smiled. "You always have the best metaphors." That's because I've cleaned a lot of rooms, I said, grinning. Daniel came over and sat on the armrest beside Amelia. For a moment, the three of us sat there in comfortable silence, listening to the faint hiss of the radiator. This was peace. Not the loud kind that demands attention. The quiet kind that comes when everyone in the room finally sees each other clearly. Before they left, Amelia hugged me again. Next week, she said, same time. We'll bring dessert. Make it something sweet enough to forget the past, I said. Daniel smiled. Or sweet enough to remember the good parts. I liked that better. After they left, I stood by the door for a while, listening to the echo of their laughter fading down the hall. Then I turned off the lights, sat back on the couch, and whispered, "This is what home is supposed to feel like." It arrived on a Tuesday morning, the letter. No courier, no seal of importance, just a plain white envelope slipped through my mailbox, the handwriting neat but trembling. I knew it was her before I even opened it. The return address read, Victoria Moreau. The same name that once made me grit my teeth now just made me sigh. I sat by the window with my coffee and opened it slowly, half expecting it to sting. But it didn't. Inside was a short note, handwritten in dark blue ink. Mrs. Carter, I've spent weeks trying to find the right words, but words have always been my shield, not my truth. So instead, I'd like to invite you to dinner. No silver, no servants, no audience. Just food cooked by my own hands. I want to thank you the only way I know how, by finally learning to serve someone else. If you can forgive me enough to share a meal, I'll be here. Friday, 7 p.m. Sincerely, Victoria. I read it 3 times. Each line felt like an echo, the ghost of a woman unlearning herself. For a moment, I wasn't sure how to feel. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to stay in my hard-earned peace. But another part, the one that still believed in second chances, whispered, go. Forgiveness, after all, doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing not to keep score anymore. Friday came sooner than I expected. I didn't dress up. I wore a simple navy dress, a cardigan, and my old silver bracelet, the same one I'd worn when I started my company. It reminded me who I was before pride or pain ever entered the room. The Moreau mansion looked different this time. The garden was quieter, the lights softer. When I rang the bell, it wasn't a maid who answered. It was Victoria. She opened the door herself. Her hair was tied back, her sleeves rolled up, and there was flour on her hands. The smell of roasted vegetables and thyme drifted through the air. Good evening, she said, almost shy. Good evening, I replied. You look human. She laughed softly, and for once it wasn't bitter. That's progress. She led me inside. The chandeliers were dimmed, and the long dining table had been replaced with a smaller one near the kitchen, 2 plates, 2 glasses, no servants. I hope you don't mind something simple, she said, placing a steaming dish on the table. After all this time, simple is my favourite, I said. She nodded, then sat down across from me. Her hands were trembling slightly, but her eyes were steady. We ate mostly in silence at first. It wasn't awkward, just tender, like 2 people quietly stitching the fabric of something that had been torn. Halfway through dinner, she finally spoke. I thought I'd feel embarrassed, she said, cooking for you after everything I said, but instead I feel peaceful. Peace usually comes after the hardest kind of honesty, I said. She looked down at her plate. I don't know if I'll ever deserve forgiveness. You don't have to deserve it, I said gently. You just have to live like you're grateful for it. Her eyes glistened. I still think about that night, she said. The way you looked at me when I offered you that check. I've never hated myself more. You don't need to hate yourself, I said. Just don't forget yourself again. She nodded slowly. I won't. When we finished, she stood and began clearing the plates. Instinctively, I got up to help. She stopped me, shaking her head. No, she said softly. Please, let me. I hesitated, then sat back down. Watching her carry dishes to the sink felt strangely poetic. The woman who once measured her worth in diamonds now rinsing plates in warm water. When she returned, she set 2 cups of tea on the table. "Chamomile," she said with a faint smile. "I remember you like it." I took a sip. It was perfect, the right balance of bitter and sweet. She looked at me and said quietly, "I'm not asking to be your friend. I just wanted to prove to myself that I could meet you as an equal, not as a woman pretending to be above or beneath you." I smiled. "You just did." For a long time we sat in silence, sipping tea while the rain began to patter gently against the windows, as if the world itself was applauding the small, quiet miracle happening in that room. Before I left, she walked me to the door again. This time there was no awkwardness, no tension, just 2 women standing in the same truth. As I stepped outside, she called after me, "Mrs. Carter, thank you for teaching me how to be small enough to grow again." I turned, smiled softly, and said, "Then maybe this time the cleaning actually worked." She laughed, a real laugh, and for the first time it didn't echo off marble. It stayed soft, human, and alive. When I drove away, I realized something. Forgiveness doesn't always end with an embrace. Sometimes it just ends with a shared meal, and the quiet knowing that redemption finally found its way home. It's strange the way silence sounds after a storm. For weeks I'd been bracing for noise, the kind that follows chaos, gossip, bitterness, echoes of pride trying to survive. But none of that came, only quiet. I suppose that's what healing really is, not a sudden joy, but the absence of pain. Sometimes I still think about that night, the silverware, the laughter that wasn't laughter, the faces that measured me before I'd even spoken. And then I think of the last time I saw Victoria, her hands wet from washing dishes, her eyes unguarded, finally human. That memory cleanses the first one. It doesn't erase it, but it softens it. I've learned that revenge and forgiveness are sisters, born from the same wound but raised differently. Revenge wants to hurt back, forgiveness wants to heal forward, and somewhere in between them lives truth. When I was younger, I used to think power was about being seen, about proving your worth to people who doubted you. But now I know, real power is the ability to walk away from the table without needing anyone's approval. I didn't forgive Victoria that night because she asked for it. I forgave her because I didn't want her reflection living rent-free in my peace anymore. And maybe that's the lesson I was supposed to learn all along, that dignity doesn't need an audience, and silence, when earned, is louder than applause. Last Sunday, Amelia and Daniel came over again. We ate together, laughed easily, and when they left, Amelia hugged me the way she used to when she was a little girl, tight, trusting, safe. As I watched them drive off, I realized that what I'd fought for wasn't revenge, it was legacy, not the kind you leave in money, but the kind you plant in people. Because respect, real respect, doesn't pass through inheritance. It's built, moment by moment, through how we treat others when no one's watching. Later that night, I took out the old uniform again, the grey one with the faded logo and the name Helen stitched on the chest. I held it under the light, tracing the letters with my finger. It wasn't a disguise anymore. It was history, proof of how far I'd come and how far kindness could go when pride stepped aside. I folded it gently, placed it in a box, and wrote one word on the lid: grace. Because that's what this whole story was about, really. Not revenge, not victory. Grace, the quiet kind that doesn't shout, the kind that simply is. Before I went to bed, I poured myself a cup of tea, chamomile of course, and stood by the window. The city lights blinked like 1,000 little reminders that everyone's fighting a battle no one sees. Some with money, some with memory, some with themselves. And then, as if on cue, the rain started again. Soft, steady, familiar. The kind that doesn't drown, it cleanses. I smiled and whispered, mostly to myself, respect is the only wealth that never loses value. And as the rain tapped gently against the glass, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Peace that didn't need to be earned. Just peace. If you've ever been judged for how you look or where you came from, remember this: your worth isn't up for discussion. Don't waste your light proving it to people who live in shadows. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to hide your true self just to see someone's real face? And if this story touched you, share it. Maybe someone out there needs the reminder that kindness is power too. Until next time, stay kind, stay grounded, and never forget who you are.